The envelope was sitting on my plate when I walked into the dining room. Cream-colored, heavy paper, my grandmother's initials embossed in the top left corner. I knew that envelope. I'd watched my grandmother seal envelopes exactly like it at her kitchen table for 20 years before she died. She used them for important things. Birthday cards with money inside. Letters to her lawyer. Christmas bonuses for the woman who cleaned her house. And the last will and testament she updated 6 weeks before the stroke. My father was standing at the head of the table holding a glass of red wine. 23 people were already seated. My sister Brooke was in the seat that used to be mine, the one next to Dad, wearing a cream silk blouse that matched the envelope like she'd planned it. Maybe she had. There she is, my father said, and he smiled the way he smiles when he's about to do something he's been rehearsing. Kate. Sit down, sweetheart. I was just about to make an announcement. I sat. The chair was at the far end, next to my cousin Peter and his wife, near the kitchen door where servers would pass. I looked at the envelope on my plate. My name was on the front in my grandmother's handwriting, the loopy K she always made too big. My father tapped his glass with a spoon. Before we eat, I want to take a moment. As most of you know, my mother passed in March. It's been a hard year. And there've been some decisions to make about her estate that I've been thinking about for a long time. My hands went cold. Grandma Ruth left very specific instructions. But she also gave me, as executor, some discretion. And after a lot of prayer and consideration, Linda and I decided that the fair thing, the right thing, was to consolidate. He looked at Brooke. Brooke looked at the tablecloth, her cheeks already pink, already performing the modesty she was about to require. Brooke and Marcus are building. They've got the twins, they're buying the house on Birchwood, they've got real responsibilities. Kate, you're doing your own thing. You're independent. You've always been independent. And we respect that. Someone at the table said, "Oh, Bill." He kept going. So the inheritance Grandma left for the girls, we're giving it to Brooke. All of it. To help with the house, the kids, the future. Kate, your envelope has a letter from me explaining everything. I hope you understand. This is what family does. 22 faces turned to look at me. My father raised his glass. To Brooke. To building something that lasts. Glasses lifted. Someone said to Brooke. My Aunt Patricia said it louder than necessary. Brooke was crying now, one careful tear, dabbing it with a napkin. Marcus had his arm around her. My mother was nodding like she was agreeing with a sermon. I picked up the envelope. Inside was a typed letter from my father. 1 page. It said the money Grandma Ruth had left me, $148,000, had been transferred to a joint account in Brooke and Marcus's names 4 days earlier. It said he hoped I would see this as an act of love. It said he trusted me to understand. There was no check. There was nothing else in the envelope. I folded the letter back along the crease my father had made. I set it next to my water glass. I picked up my fork. What happened in the 9 days after that, my father will never be able to explain to anyone in that room without it sounding like a confession. But I'll tell you. Because somebody should. My name is Kate Dempsey. I'm 34 years old. I work as a commercial insurance adjuster in Raleigh, and I live alone in a condo I bought with my own money the year I turned 30. I have one sister, Brooke, who is 37. And until the night my father handed me that envelope, I had spent my entire adult life being the daughter my family preferred not to think about too hard. I want to explain something before I tell you the rest, because if I don't, the decision I made won't make sense. You have to understand what I was before you understand what I stopped being. When Brooke was 7 and I was 4, my grandmother Ruth started a savings account for each of us. $50 a month, every month, for decades. She was a second-grade teacher who retired with a pension, a paid-off house, and the kind of quiet discipline that builds fortunes when no one's watching. By the time she died, the accounts she'd set up for Brooke and me were worth $148,000 each. She told us about them at Christmas when I was 26. She said, "When I'm gone, you girls will have something to start your real lives with. Don't waste it. And don't let anybody tell you what to do with it. It's yours." She looked at me specifically when she said that last part. I remember, because my father was in the next room. My father's name is Bill Dempsey. He owns a small contracting business in Wake County. For trucks, 8 employees, steady work. He's been the patriarch of our family since his own father died in 1998, and he takes the title seriously. Bill makes the decisions. Bill decides where Thanksgiving happens. Bill decides who's behaving and who isn't. My mother, Linda, agrees with him the way some women agree with weather. It's just what's happening, there's no point fighting it. Brooke was the first daughter. The wanted one. My mother had a hard pregnancy with her and was told she couldn't have any more children. Then I came along 3 years later as a surprise, and according to family legend, my father said, "Well, we'll figure it out." That's the sentence that set the tone for my entire childhood. Brooke was planned. I was figured out. Brooke got piano lessons. I got whatever Brooke had outgrown. Brooke got a car at 16, a used Honda my father bought from a guy he knew. When I turned 16, my father told me that cars were a privilege and I hadn't earned one yet. I worked at a Hardee's and bought my own car at 17, a 2003 Corolla with a cracked windshield, for $2,400 cash. My father told me it was a good life lesson. I can tell you, down to the month, when I stopped expecting anything from them. I was 19. My grandmother on my mother's side died, and she left each of the grandchildren a small amount of money, $3,000 each. Not much, but it mattered. I was in my second year of college at East Carolina, paying my own way with loans and 2 jobs, and $3,000 was going to cover my textbooks for the rest of my degree. My father held the checks at his house because we were minors in his mind, even though I was legally an adult. When I asked him for mine, he told me he'd used it to help Brooke with her wedding. Brooke was 22. She was marrying Marcus. The wedding cost $34,000. My $3,000 had gone toward the flowers. My father said, "You can pay her back someday when you're on your feet." Meaning Brooke. Not him. Not the grandmother who'd left it to me. Brooke. I didn't fight about it. I was 19 and I was tired and I had 2 jobs and I didn't have the strength to make it a thing. I took out another loan for my books. And I made a decision, quietly, in my dorm room, that I was never going to ask my family for anything again. Not help. Not support. Not recognition. I was going to build my own life so completely separate from theirs that when they finally noticed I was gone, it would already be too late to hold on to me. I finished school in 3.5 years. I got my insurance license at 23. I took every certification my company offered because certifications came with raises. By 27 I was making $72,000. By 30 I was making $94,000 and I bought my condo with a 20% down payment I'd saved by living on less than half my income for 4 years. I have $41,000 in my 401k. I have an emergency fund that can cover 8 months of expenses. I have good credit, no consumer debt, and a paid-off car. My family has no idea about any of this. They think I rent. They think I live paycheck to paycheck. They think I drive the same Corolla I bought at 17, which I sold in 2019 for parts. My mother asked me at Christmas last year if I was managing okay, and I said yes, and she said, "Well, we can probably help a little if things get tight." I let her think she was being generous. I learned a long time ago that information in my family was currency, and every time I shared mine, Brooke got richer. When I got my insurance license, I told my mother. 2 weeks later, my father asked if I could look at Marcus's policy because Marcus was thinking about switching. That turned into 14 hours of unpaid work over 3 weekends. When I told Brooke I'd been promoted, she told me I must be working too hard and offered to pray for my stress levels. When I mentioned once that my condo had appreciated, my father said, "Real estate is tricky. You should talk to me before you make any moves." I had already made the moves. He didn't know I owned it. So by the time Grandma Ruth died in March, I had spent 15 years being the daughter who was fine, who was independent, who didn't need anything. And my family had spent 15 years taking that at face value because it was convenient. The thing is, Grandma Ruth knew. She was the only one who knew. She used to call me every Sunday night for about 6 years before she died. Not Brooke. Me. She'd ask about work, about the condo, about the guy I dated for a while in 2021. She'd tell me about her garden and the book she was reading and the dumb things my father had said at her last birthday. She told me once, near the end, that she worried about what would happen when she was gone. She said, "Your father has a blind spot about Brooke. He's going to try to do something with that money, Kate. Don't let him." I told her I wouldn't. I thought I knew what she meant. I thought she meant Dad might pressure me to loan it to Brooke, or invest it in Marcus's business, or help with the twins' college fund. I did not, in my most paranoid moment, imagine that he would simply take it and give it to her. Grandma Ruth had her stroke on a Tuesday in February. She was 81. She lingered for 3 weeks in a rehab facility, unable to speak clearly, recognizing us only sometimes. I drove down from Raleigh every weekend and sat with her. Brooke came once, for 45 minutes, and had to leave because the twins had soccer. My father visited every day, which surprised me, because they hadn't been close for years. I thought at the time it was love. Looking back, I think he was counting. She died on March 14th. Her will was read a week later at the offices of her longtime attorney, a man named Robert Fontaine who'd handled her affairs for 30 years. My father insisted on being there alone with Mr. Fontaine for the first meeting, to handle the paperwork as executor. My mother told me he didn't want to overwhelm the girls with details. I accepted that because Grandma Ruth had told me what was in the will, and I trusted the paperwork would follow. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out for another 11 weeks, was that my father had asked Mr. Fontaine a very specific question in that meeting. He'd asked whether, as executor, he had any discretion to redirect the bequests. Mr. Fontaine had told him no. The will was specific. $148,000 to each granddaughter, to be transferred directly to accounts in their names within 90 days of probate closing. My father had said he understood. He'd signed the paperwork. And then he had, over the following 7 weeks, done something I still can't fully explain except to say that Bill Dempsey believes, with his whole heart, that he is the final authority on what is fair in his family. On May 2nd, he had Brooke and Marcus come to his office. He told them he'd decided to give them both inheritances. He told them he'd already talked to me about it and I was on board. He told them the paperwork was in process and the money would be in their joint account within the week. He transferred my $148,000 from the account Mr. Fontaine had set up in my name, using a signature authorization he'd retained from when I was a minor, a document that was almost certainly invalid but that nobody at the bank questioned because he'd been my grandmother's co-signer for 20 years and the system still had his name flagged. The money moved on May 4th. Brooke and Marcus saw it hit their account on May 5th. They closed on the house on Birchwood on May 12th using $120,000 of it as a down payment. I did not know any of this on the night of the dinner. On the night of the dinner, I thought Grandma Ruth's estate was still in probate. I thought the envelope on my plate might be a check, or a letter about when the distribution would come, or an update on the timeline. I had been waiting for it patiently, the way Grandma Ruth had told me to, not bringing it up, not asking, not making anyone uncomfortable. Because that's who I am. That's who I had been trained to be. The dinner was at my parents' house. It was Memorial Day weekend, Sunday, May 25th. The occasion, officially, was Brooke and Marcus's new house. My mother had been planning it for weeks. 23 people, a caterer, tables set up on the back patio because the dining room couldn't hold everyone. String lights, real napkins, a seating chart and my mother's careful handwriting. I had almost not gone. I'd been fighting a bad cold, I had a deposition prep for Tuesday morning, and something about my mother's voicemail had felt off. She'd called on Thursday and said, "Kate, we really need you there. Your father has something special planned." My mother doesn't say special lightly. She says nice or fine or good. Special was a word she used at weddings and funerals. I should have heard it. I didn't. I got there at 6:15. The driveway was full of cars I recognized. Aunt Patricia's silver Lexus. Uncle Dan's truck. Peter's minivan with the dent in the back. I parked on the street and walked up with a bottle of wine I'd bought that morning, a $20 Cabernet from Harris Teeter, because I still cared, at 34 years old, about bringing something to my parents' house. Brooke met me at the door. She hugged me. She said, "Kate, I'm so glad you came." She was wearing the cream silk blouse. She smelled like the perfume she'd worn to her wedding, the one she always broke out for important events. She held on to the hug a second too long, and I remember thinking, in a small confused corner of my mind, that something was about to happen. Inside, the house was loud with voices. My mother was in the kitchen with the caterer, waving her hands about the placement of the salad. My father was in the living room holding court with Uncle Dan and two of his contracting buddies he'd invited, which was unusual. Marcus was in the backyard with the twins, who were running in circles around the patio table. I hugged everyone I was supposed to hug. I asked the polite questions. I put my wine on the counter and nobody noticed. The seating chart was on the patio. I found my name. I was at the far end, next to Peter and his wife, which was fine. I liked Peter. What caught my attention was the envelope. Every other place setting had a small card with the guest's name written in my mother's calligraphy. Mine had an envelope. A cream one. Heavy paper. Initials in the corner. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds. Then I sat down, and I made small talk with Peter, and I waited. My father clinked his glass at 6:42. I know the time because I looked at my phone when he did it. I had a habit, at family events, of checking the time every so often to calculate how much longer I had to stay. Peter was mid-sentence about his job when the sound cut across the patio, and everybody turned toward the head of the table like they'd been waiting for it. My mother was already seated. She'd taken her place to my father's right. Brooke was to his left, in the seat that used to be mine from the time I was 7 until I was about 22, when Brooke got married and was promoted to the chair of honor at all family functions. Marcus was next to Brooke. The twins were at a small kids' table a few feet away, being managed by Aunt Patricia, who adored them. My father started talking. I've already told you what he said. I played it back in my head so many times the words don't feel like memory anymore, they feel like script. The part one didn't tell you, the part that mattered, was what happened in my body while he was saying it. I went cold first. Then I got very warm. Then my ears started ringing, not loudly, but enough that my father's voice sounded slightly underwater. I remember watching his mouth move and thinking, very clearly, he is talking about Grandma Ruth's money. He is telling everyone he gave it to Brooke. He is doing this in front of 23 people on purpose. I looked at my mother. She was nodding. She knew. I looked at Brooke. Brooke was looking at the tablecloth, but her mouth was in a small pressed smile I knew well, the smile she made when she was receiving something she felt entitled to but was pretending to be embarrassed about. She'd made that smile when she got the Honda at 16. She'd made that smile at her bridal shower. She was making it now. I looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking directly at me. And in Marcus's face, there was something I didn't expect. He looked uncomfortable. Not ashamed, exactly, but like a man who'd been told the story one way and was only now realizing the story had a different ending for other people in the room. His eyes slid away from mine fast. My father raised his glass. To Brooke. To building something that lasts. The glass is lifted. Aunt Patricia said, to Brooke, loud and wet, because she'd already had 2 glasses of wine. Uncle Dan said it. Peter said it, quietly, next to me, and I felt him glance at my face and then look away. Marcus said it. My mother said it. Brooke said it, last, with a little laugh that was supposed to sound humble. Nobody looked at me. I picked up the envelope. I opened it. I read the letter. It was exactly 2 paragraphs long, single-spaced, printed on my father's business stationery with the Dempsey contracting logo in the top left corner. He'd put his logo on it. Like it was an invoice. The letter said, Dear Kate, by the time you read this, the distribution from your grandmother's estate has been redirected to Brooke and Marcus to assist with their home purchase and the raising of our grandchildren. The amount of $148,000 has been transferred, with my authorization as executor, to their joint account as of May 4th. I know this may come as a surprise, but your mother and I prayed about this decision for many weeks and we believe it is the right one. You have built a good life for yourself and you do not have the same obligations that Brooke carries. Family means taking care of the ones who need it most. I trust you will see this as the act of love it is intended to be. Love, Dad. I read it twice. I set it down. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of the salad that had appeared on my plate at some point during the toast. It was arugula and pear and blue cheese. I remember that because I chewed it very slowly and the blue cheese was the only thing I could taste. Peter leaned toward me. He said, very quietly, Kate, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. He said, that seemed like a lot. I said, it's fine, Peter. Eat your salad. He looked at me for another second, then he did what I told him. My mother was watching me from across the table. She had the expression she wears when she's waiting for me to make a scene so she can tell people later that I made a scene. I'd seen it at holidays, at Brooke's wedding, at my college graduation when she found out I hadn't invited my father's best friend. It was a hungry expression. She wanted me to react. I ate my salad. I drank my water. I asked Peter's wife about their kitchen renovation, and she told me about it for 5 minutes, and I asked follow-up questions, and I laughed at the parts that were supposed to be funny. At one point Brooke caught my eye down the table and mouthed thank you, and I nodded like I knew what she was thanking me for, because it wasn't the moment to ask. The main course came. Beef tenderloin, potatoes, green beans. I ate about a third of it. My father made another toast, this one to my mother, for hosting. Aunt Patricia made a toast to the twins. Uncle Dan made a toast to Brooke and Marcus's new house. There were 4 toasts total and I wasn't mentioned in any of them. At 7:49, dessert was served. Tiramisu from the caterer. I took 2 bites and set down my spoon. I stood up. My mother said, Kate, you're not leaving already. I said, I have a deposition on Tuesday. I have to prep tomorrow. My father said, sit down for another few minutes. The girls haven't opened the housewarming gift. I said, I'm sorry. I really do have to go. I picked up my purse. I took the envelope and the letter and I slid them both inside. I walked around the table and I hugged my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt Evelyn, who was 86 and had driven up from Fayetteville. I told her I loved her. I told her to drive safe. I did not hug my parents. I did not hug Brooke. I said goodnight to Peter, who squeezed my hand, and I walked through the house and out the front door. I got to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I did not start the engine. I sat there in the dark for about 4 minutes, with my hands on the steering wheel, and I thought about exactly one thing, which was what my grandmother had said to me on the phone 2 months before she died. Your father has a blind spot about Brooke. Don't let him. I drove home. I did not cry. I got to my condo at 9:17. I put my purse on the counter. I took out the letter. I read it one more time. Then I did something I had not done in 15 years of being the good daughter, the quiet daughter, the daughter who absorbed everything and didn't complain. I opened my laptop and I started a folder. I named it Dempsey. Into it, I put a scan of the letter. I put a screenshot of my banking app, showing the account Mr. Fontaine had set up in my name, which I now realized I had not checked since early April, and which now showed a balance of $0. 00 with a transfer date of May 4th. I put a screenshot of the email Mr. Fontaine had sent me in March confirming the timeline. I put the phone number for his office. I put my grandmother's most recent will, which she had emailed to me in January and which I had saved to my drive and forgotten about, because I'd trusted everyone involved. Then I closed the laptop. I took a shower. I went to bed. I slept for 9 hours. The next morning, Monday, I called in sick to work. Not because I was sick. Because I needed a day to think, and I have never, in 11 years at my company, called in sick on a day I wasn't sick. I had the time. I used it. I did 3 things that day. I called Mr. Fontaine's office and scheduled an appointment for Wednesday afternoon. I called my bank and placed a hold on any incoming transfers or wires related to my father's name. And I made a list. The list was not long. It was about 14 items. It was everything I currently did, voluntarily, for my family that I had never been thanked for and had never billed anyone for. It was the unpaid labor I'd absorbed for 15 years because I was the daughter who was fine. Number 1 on the list was my father's business insurance. I had been informally reviewing his commercial policies for 4 years. I'd caught 2 mistakes in his coverage that had saved him approximately $11,000 in premiums. He paid me nothing. He'd never offered. Number 2 was my mother's health insurance. She was on a marketplace plan, and every November during open enrollment I walked her through her options because she didn't understand them and my father didn't want to pay a broker. It took about 6 hours every year. Number 3 was the shared calendar for all of my grandmother's medical appointments during the last 2 years of her life. I'd built it. I'd maintained it. I'd coordinated rides and updates between my parents, Brooke, and the rehab facility. Number 4 was Marcus's car insurance, which I'd gotten him a discount on through my network. Number 5 through 12 were a mix of tax question answers, financial planning conversations, loan advice, and one incident where I'd spent an entire Saturday helping my father file a claim on a roof that had been damaged in a storm. He didn't know how to upload photos to the insurance portal. Number 13 was Brooke's homeowner's policy on the new house. She'd asked me 2 weeks ago if I could take a look at it before they closed. I had agreed. She'd sent me the paperwork the previous Thursday. Number 14 was Christmas. I hosted an after brunch at my condo every year on December 26th for my parents, Brooke, Marcus, and the twins. I paid for everything. I cleaned for 2 days before. I cooked for 6 hours. Nobody ever brought anything. My mother had referred to it, once, as Kate's little thing. I looked at the list. I opened my email. I sent a 1-line reply to Brooke's email about the homeowner's policy. It said, "I won't be able to help with this. I'd recommend reaching out to a licensed broker in your area." I didn't sign it. I didn't explain. I did not send anything to my parents. I did not call anybody. I did not block anybody. I just, very quietly, stopped. Tuesday I went to work. I did my deposition prep. I did my deposition. I did not mention anything to anyone. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove to Mr. Fontaine's office in downtown Raleigh, and I sat across from him, and I handed him the letter my father had given me on Sunday night. Mr. Fontaine read it. Mr. Fontaine read it a second time. Mr. Fontaine took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. He said, "Kate, I want to be very clear with you. Your father did not have the authority to do this." I said, "I know." He said, "The signature he used to authorize the transfer would not have been valid if the bank had challenged it. It was based on a cosigner arrangement from when you were a minor. That arrangement terminated when you turned 18. The bank made an error." I said, "I know." He said, "You have legal options. Several of them. I said, I know. I need a few days. Can you put together a summary of what he actually did, with dates and documentation, that I can share with people if I need to? I'm not filing anything yet. I'm gathering. Mr. Fontaine looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, your grandmother told me you were the smart one. I said, she told me the same about herself. He almost smiled. He said, I'll have it to you by Friday. I left his office and I went home and I did nothing dramatic for 8 more days. I worked. I ran. I met a friend for coffee on Thursday. I went to a yoga class on Saturday. I did not call my family. I did not answer my mother's 2 texts, one asking if I'd gotten home safely, the second asking if I was upset about something. I did not respond to my father's email on Wednesday, which said simply, hope you had time to think about our conversation. Love, Dad. I let the quiet sit. What I did not know, during those 8 days, was what was happening on the other side of the silence. My father's business had been running on a margin thinner than he admitted to anyone. The new house on Birchwood had been a stretch for Brooke and Marcus even with my $148,000. They had used $120,000 on the down payment and the rest on closing costs, repairs, and a new HVAC system. They had nothing left. They had bought a house at the very top of what they could afford, on the assumption that Brooke's paycheck and Marcus's paycheck would handle the mortgage with no margin for error. I also didn't know that my father had, 3 months earlier, used my grandmother's estate account as collateral on a short-term business loan. He had not told anyone. He'd assumed he would pay it back when probate closed and the money came out. When he'd moved my $148,000 to Brooke on May 4th, he had moved more money than was technically cleared. The bank had allowed it because of the cosigner flag, which also meant that when the loan came due on June 3rd, and the funds weren't where he said they'd be, the bank's fraud department opened a review. I didn't know any of that. I was just living my life. On Tuesday, June 3rd, 9 days after the dinner, my father's phone rang at 10:42 in the morning. The caller ID said First Carolina Bank, Commercial Banking Division. He answered because he thought it was about an invoice. The woman on the line identified herself as a senior officer in the fraud review unit. She had questions about a transfer executed on May 4th from an estate account in the name of Kate Dempsey to a joint account held by Brooke Dempsey Harrow and Marcus Harrow. She asked if he was able to come in that afternoon to discuss. He said he was the executor of the estate and he'd handled the transfer himself. She said that was one of the things they wanted to discuss. He drove to the bank at 1:15. He sat in a small conference room for 40 minutes. 2 people came in, the woman from the phone and a man from the bank's legal department. They laid out a set of documents. They asked him to explain, in his own words, what authorization he had used to execute the transfer. They asked him for documentation showing I had consented. They told him that Kate Dempsey had placed a hold on any further transactions involving her father's name on May 26, one day after a family dinner at which, according to notes from a phone call Kate had made to the bank's retail banking line, her father had announced the transfer publicly. They told him the bank had a fiduciary obligation to review the transaction. They told him that if I filed a formal complaint, the bank would be required to cooperate with law enforcement. My father, I am told, did not handle this well. He raised his voice. He told them he was the patriarch of the family. He told them this was a private matter. He told them that Kate was difficult and emotional and that I would be calling to clear things up within the hour. They told him they would wait to hear from me. He left the bank at 2:30. He sat in his truck in the parking lot. He called my mother. My mother called me. I did not answer. She left a voicemail that I still have, in which her voice was shaking in a way I had never heard before. She said, Kate, please call me back. Something is happening with the bank and I need to understand what you've done. Please, Kate. Your father is very upset. Please call. I did not call. At 3:03, my father called me directly. I did not answer. At 3:15, he called again. At 3:32, he called again. At 3:41, he texted, Kate. I need you to call the bank and tell them this is a misunderstanding. Now. I did not respond. At 4:09, Brooke called me. I did not answer. She called again at 4:17. At 4:24, she texted, Kate, what the hell did you do? Our account is frozen. I read the text. I put my phone down. I kept working. I had a claim I was reviewing. At 5:02, Marcus called me. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was shorter than Brooke's and more controlled. He said, Kate, this is Marcus. I think there's been a serious miscommunication and I would like to talk to you about it when you have a chance. Please call me back at your convenience. He said at your convenience like a man who had realized, finally, that nothing about this was convenient for me. At 5:46, my mother called again. Voicemail. Kate, your father is not well. He has not eaten. He is sitting in the living room and he will not speak. Please call your mother. At 6:19, Aunt Patricia called me. This was new. Aunt Patricia had not called me in 4 years, not since a disagreement about a family reunion. I let it ring. By the end of that Tuesday, June 3rd, I had 19 missed calls and 11 text messages. I had not answered any of them. I made dinner. I did the dishes. I watched a show. I went to bed at 10:30. I slept 8 hours. On Wednesday morning, June 4th, I woke up to 43 missed calls and 31 text messages, and I made myself a cup of coffee, and I sat at my kitchen table, and I opened the folder on my laptop labeled Dempsey, and I started to read through everything one more time, very carefully, from the beginning. I answered the phone at 9:15 on Wednesday morning. It was my father, calling for the 11th time that day. I let him speak first. He said, Kate. Thank God. Listen to me. There's been a misunderstanding at the bank. I need you to call them and clear it up. Today. This morning. I said, no. There was a long silence. Then he said, what do you mean, no? I said, I mean I'm not going to call the bank. The transfer you executed on May 4th was not authorized by me. The bank has asked me whether I want to file a formal complaint. I haven't decided yet. He said, Kate, if you file a complaint, they could refer this to the district attorney. Do you understand what you'd be doing to me? I said, I understand exactly what I'd be doing. I'm asking you to understand what you did. He started to raise his voice. I let him. I let him talk about family, and loyalty, and how Brooke had children and I didn't, and how I'd always been difficult, and how this was exactly the kind of thing my mother had warned him about. I did not interrupt. I did not defend myself. When he was done, which took about 4 minutes, I said one sentence. I said, Dad, you didn't redirect an inheritance. You took money out of an account with my name on it and you gave it to someone else. That's not a family decision. That's a thing that has a legal name. He was quiet. I said, here's what's going to happen. You are going to call Mr. Fontaine this afternoon. You are going to sign a document acknowledging that the May 4th transfer was executed without my authorization. Brooke and Marcus are going to sign a document agreeing to a repayment plan, with interest, over a timeframe Mr. Fontaine and I find acceptable. They can keep the house. I'm not asking for the house. I'm asking for my money back, in writing, with a schedule. He said, they don't have it, Kate. They put it in the house. I said, I know. That's why we're doing a repayment plan and not a demand. If you all sign the paperwork by Friday, I won't file a complaint with the bank. If you don't, I will. He said, your mother is going to be devastated. I said, Dad, my mother nodded when you made that toast. She knew. She's been devastated about the wrong things for a long time. He started to cry. I had never heard my father cry in my life. Not when his own father died. Not at Grandma Ruth's funeral. He cried for about 30 seconds on the phone, and I sat at my kitchen table and I waited, and I did not comfort him, because comforting him was how we had gotten here. When he stopped, I said, "I'm going to hang up now. Mr. Fontaine is expecting your call. Please don't call me again until the paperwork is signed." He said, "Kate. I'm sorry." I said, "I know you think you are." I hung up. The paperwork was signed on Friday, June 6. Brooke and Marcus agreed to pay me back $2,100 a month for 84 months, with 3% interest, secured against the house on Birchwood. My father signed a separate acknowledgement that the May 4 transfer had been unauthorized, which Mr. Fontaine placed in a sealed file with instructions that it be released to me if I ever needed it. I did not file the bank complaint. That was 10 months ago. I still live in my condo in Raleigh. I still work as a commercial insurance adjuster. I got promoted in October. I'm a senior adjuster now, and I'm studying for a professional designation that will move me into management in about 2 years. My emergency fund has a name now. I call it the Grandma Ruth Fund because that's what she would have wanted it to be. The $2,100 a month comes in on the 1st of every month. Brooke sets it to auto-pay. We don't talk about it. We don't really talk at all. I had Thanksgiving alone this year, at my condo, with a small turkey breast and a good bottle of wine and a movie I'd been saving. It was the best Thanksgiving of my adult life. Aunt Patricia invited me to hers. I said thank you, and I said no. My mother sends me a text every Sunday. It always says the same thing. Thinking of you. I love you. Mom. I don't answer. I don't block her either. I'm not ready yet to do either one. My father and I have spoken twice since June. Once about a document Mr. Fontaine needed him to sign. Once at a cousin's wedding in October, where we passed each other at the bar and he said, "You look well, Kate," and I said, "Thank you. You too." That was the entire conversation. He has aged a lot in 10 months. I noticed that, and I did not feel sorry about it, and I did not feel good about it. I just noticed. The letter he wrote me, the one with the Dempsey contracting logo at the top, is in a folder in my filing cabinet labeled May 25th. I don't look at it. I don't need to. I know what it says. Last Sunday, I went to my grandmother's grave. It's in a small cemetery outside Durham where her own parents are buried. I brought her the daffodils she liked. I sat on the grass for a while. I told her that the money was coming back. I told her about the promotion. I told her I was okay. On the way home, I stopped at a diner off the highway and had pancakes by myself at the counter, and the woman who poured my coffee called me honey in the way waitresses do, without meaning it and meaning it at the same time. I sat there for almost an hour. I didn't check my phone once. That's the part nobody tells you about, when you finally stop being the one who absorbs it all. The quiet isn't empty. The quiet is the first time you can hear yourself. If you watched this far, you already know this story hit different. If you want more stories like this one, real ones, the kind people are afraid to tell, they're on your screen right now. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.